Thanks, Bryony. So this is the final session in our GDE zone. We've had an extremely productive couple of days. I'd like to thank everybody who's contributed to the session, both in terms of our pilot sites who've described their experience with the GDE program, and also in terms of the audience for their excellent contributions over the last couple of days or so. So I think we've seen, going all the way back to Matthew Swindell's presentation on the first morning, Matthew very well articulated the challenges which the NHS faces in terms of service delivery and improvements in efficiency. I think we're clear that digital and the GDE programme has got a leading role to play in terms of how we deliver those efficiencies. So for this closing panel, we've got Aid and Tim, who asked them to introduce themselves in a minute, and we'll run through a few questions just to get the discussion going, and then we'd really welcome questions from the audience, both in terms of general context of GDE, the blueprinting programme, and any other issues that you may have heard about over the past 2 days. So without further ado, Aid and I were planning this session late into the night last night on our field mission, so we are well acquainted with the structure for this session. So Aid, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and then Tim.
So you just want a straightforward introduction from me, who I am, really?
Yes, please, yeah.
Nothing about the GDE.
You can tell that gag about the guy with the T's and the H's if you want. But
Oh yeah, well, we did meet a guy last night who couldn't pronounce his TH's or his F's. I said, you can't say fairer than that. So that's the second time I've told that gag today. I'm like Ken Dodd. I'm Adrian Byrne. I'm the CIO at University Hospital Southampton. We are a GDE, like Gareth is from a GDE organisation. We therefore think the GDE programme is great. I'm also chair of the National CIO Network. So that's where I'm coming from, if you like.
Good afternoon. My name's Tim Ellis. I'm Head of Digital Technology at NHS England, and a big part of the provider digitisation programme is the GDEs and how we're using investment in the sort of most mature digital organisations to help the rest.
Okay, thanks, Tim. So perhaps, Tim, could we start with you just to give us a bit of a programme update in terms of where we are to date and where the early progress with the programme and what the next stages are?
Yep. So we have 16 acute trusts who are GDEs, and they've been working with 17 fast follower organisations, and they're some of them are on a 2-year trajectory, so they're sort of halfway through their programme of work to get to this level of maturity that's comparable with the best in the world. We also have 7 mental health GDEs, and what they've been doing is working closely with partners to establish the relationships with their fast followers and sort of really get the footings down on the programs for the fast followers, because their funding was delayed. It was slightly later than the acutes. And we've also recently announced the 3 ambulance GDEs, and so we've been working with them again just to understand the details of their program, the interim milestones, and how they're going to get to this level of maturity that others will be able to emulate. Alongside the progress that the sites are making, which is really challenging for them, we shouldn't underestimate the amount of work that's involved in being a GDE. We've also been running a pilot about blueprints and how we can make sure that we capture the information and codify it in a way that enables others to learn really effectively, because the ambition of the GDE program as regards to a tech program is that we do want to spread the learning to enable others to improve their maturity quicker and more cost effectively, and the blueprints are the vehicle for doing that. And so we've had quite an inclusive design process to say, how does this vary from what you've done in the past? We've had lots of attempts at trying to share good practice and best practice, and so we think we've got a structure now that means we can mainstream the production of the blueprints across the whole GDE community and start to build this library of intelligence. But there's also going to be this relationship. We know there's a very strong coaching relationship between the GDEs and the fast followers, and we'd hope that that would propagate, and in time the fast followers will become GDEs and they'll pick up other organisations, and we see that spread strategy moving through. There's been some other activity around learning network as well, so where there's common themes, and a good example being electronic prescribing, where there's multiple GDEs are interested in order to come up with some generic best practice and also to agree some of the standards type work. We've had a learning network facilitate sessions around that. So it's been quite an active process. As well as all of that, behind that, we're tracking the benefits. What we want the GDEs to do is to enable us to go to the Treasury and really show that sort of if you get digital right, it's of significant benefit both to patients, to staff, and to efficiency and sustainability of the organisations. And that will allow us to go to the Treasury for the next spending round and make a case for further investment, because the ambition is to get all trusts up to a high level, not just to push the GDEs. The GDE is one component, a very important component, but we do want to bring everybody's level up.
Great, thanks, Tim. So in that context, Dave, I know you've spoken already on this platform around what you're doing in Southampton with the GDE program aid. Could you sort of summarise the themes that you're progressing within your GDE and the sort of early benefits that you've seen for patients in the organisation?
So our program is broken up into 8 sections. Actually, we think that's too many because it's a difficult message to try and reiterate and get people to take on board. I wish it was 3. I like 3. People remember 3, don't they? But we've got 8, unfortunately.
Yeah,
and within that, there's about 100 programs of work, projects. But the 8 things are broadly around delivering paperless records. So we've got a theme around the electronic medical record. We've broken out prescribing. We need to do closed-loop prescribing. Tim mentioned digital maturity. If you want to get to a high level of digital maturity equivalent to HIMSS level 5 to 7, somewhere around level 6 is level 6 actually, you get into closed loop prescribing. That means you have to scan the patient's wristband and know that you're giving the right drugs to the right patient in a so-called positive identity theme. So we've split out prescribing, although it is a part of our electronic patient record thing. We've tried to call our electronic medical records beyond records, to let people know that it's not just about collecting data into a bucket, which is the kind of NHS obsession with just collecting data over the years. Are we going to use that data for some real sort of meaningful clinical decision support? We have a whole sort of theme in, and one of our 8 is also business intelligence. So that's about driving further knowledge and intelligence out of our data. Anyone who knows what we do in Southampton knows that we're one of few people who has a real a digital relationship with their patients. So there's another one of our programs. We've got about 10,000 patients on a personal health record platform now. We've got an interesting theme around the workforce and communications in the workforce, messaging systems. Messaging systems actually talk back into our EPR. So I mean, I could go on at length, and I probably won't. But it's kind of 100 projects split across 8 themes. And I think, just talking about spreading that, the challenge here is, what is blueprinting all about? And we've been talking to Tim for quite some time about it now, really. People don't understand what blueprinting is, and we're kind of making it up. And we really are making it up, actually, because there's an idea there that we want to get everyone up to that level of digital maturity. So how are we going to do it? So the idea, I think, is that the GDs are going to set examples in certain places. They're going to have fast followers that will learn from and also teach the GDEs. It's not one-way traffic, actually. And from there will be patterns and blueprints that come out of that. And it won't necessarily be about blueprinting your whole organisation. And I think that is really the key thing, that some people pick up on blueprinting. They think you're going to just lift and shift that infrastructure from one organisation and go and drop it in another one. And it is not going to work like that for a number of reasons. And I can tell you the main one right now. Because if I went to the market now to buy stuff, there is no way that I would end up with what I have. I just wouldn't buy it now. So why would I expect anyone else to buy it? So that's why it won't work. So some of it is about product, but some of it is about process and how you got there, what's your methodology and what's your architecture.
Good. Okay, thank you. So we've heard there from Tim about the general context of the programme, and also from Aid around what they're doing in Southampton and a few of the early principles around blueprinting. Probably open up to the audience now. So any questions for the panel? So Brian, I think you've got the wandering mic. Are there any questions from the audience?
There must be some. So this is addressed to the chair
Thank you,
and
Ian.
Tim. So over the last couple of days, we've heard some excellent feedback, particularly from the pilot blueprints. So Herman was speaking earlier about Luton and Dunstable, and thank you for helping us. That's been a valuable piece of work. What have you found in terms of the responses from the pilots so far? What have you been pleased about, and what do you think there are in terms of learning for us going forward?
Yeah. So I think Ian, there's been tremendous engagement with the pilot sites, and I think that's been really reassuring to see that there's a tremendous passion around the GDE program and the blueprinting program. I think we've seen that these things are spreadable. They are scalable. They can be blueprinted, and the content can be received by other organisations. I think we've also seen the amount of time that it takes. So, for example, the Royal Liverpool sepsis pathway, we knew that that's taken several weeks of work and concerted effort from partner organisations to help develop that. So I think we need to be mindful about when we're asking organisations to blueprint, how much time and commitment are we asking for, and we probably need clarity between what we're doing for a national blueprint versus what's going to be the local fast follower relationship. I think the final point, and this is something that we've discussed over the last couple of days, is there's so much knowledge within this sphere here, and I think that the challenge really is to ensure that we actually capture that, document it, and then work on what we've seen here. So I think one of the things we need to think for the future is how do we actually harvest the tremendous potential within all the GDEs to capture that learning and spread more widely.
I'm just going to be a little bit cheeky here. Dan Johnston from Improvato, and I'm also a clinician and ED nurse in the NHS. I'm imagining from what you were saying about how perhaps what Adrian was saying about vendors not necessarily, or product not necessarily delivering what you need, and it's more about process. What guidance is there for vendors to fit that customization process available out there to engage with GDEs and fast followers?
So procurement processes. People often wonder how to get involved with the NHS, don't they? People are looking for referenceability a lot, when they go to the market, and that's a challenge, obviously, for vendors. I didn't mean, actually, that products are not doing what we want them to do, though. All I meant was, sometimes you've had something in your organisation for 10 years, maybe more. Actually, if you look at our pathology system, I was a project manager for our pathology system in 1995 on a 7-year contract. And it's still there. So I did a good job, right? But it shouldn't be. Clearly it shouldn't be. And we suffer from this. We suffer from this endlessly because we create a stagnant market. And then when I come back to the market, I wonder why the hell there is not a decent pathology system that I can go and buy. Well, there's your answer, right? So what I meant was, if I go to the market now, I would not buy the pathology system that I bought in 1995. That's what I meant.
I think the other thing to say is there's a sort of a couple of frameworks that are going to emerge. So there's a GP Futures work that's looking at sort of a broader spectrum than just perhaps GP SOC used to look. And there's also this ACS framework that's being developed that is also looking at how do we get some of the capabilities that aren't readily available to us at present, some of the population health, some of the deep analytics and things like that available so that the NHS can more easily procure those things. So there's a couple of things on the horizon that are going to help, I think, with some of the more advanced features that the GDEs are exploring, as well as the basics.
A couple of questions, yeah.
With the development of the blueprints, do you think you will be further able to expedite more GDEs dealing with more fast followers? So, maybe the slow followers. But what do you see as the way to actually accelerate the growth? Because if you've got 16 trusts and that needs to expedite, say, one trust every 2 to 3 years, it's going to take a very long time. So might we be able to have more than one duck in the water in the near future?
So potentially we're looking at the GDE is one part of the provider digitization program. So there's an STP sort of directed funding pot as well that will sort of hopefully be sort of released soon, that funding. And there's other specific initiatives. So you've heard some of the Carter things about EPMA and everything. So whilst the GDEs, there is a spread strategy, and we do expect organisations as they reach sort of the definition they've done to pick up other organisations if they can, if they've got the bandwidth. It's not the only game in town. What we want to do is complement what the GDEs do, spread that learning, but also enable STPs to invest where they strategically think is best for their economy. But as the body of knowledge grows, one of the things with blueprints is some of them will be surpassed. So as other organisations do new work, we might have to retire some of the blueprints. So it's an evolving thing. But what we want is that structure to be something that persists, so that as any organisation, whether the GDA or a fast follower or not, any organisation that's doing something sort of innovative that other people can learn, we'd like them to share their learning. And there is really good learning outside of the GDE community, and we just need to be able to make that accessible and make that readily available. And so hopefully this is the start of what we've seen over the last few years, is much more of a willingness for people to learn from others and to sort of beg, borrow and steal good ideas from everywhere. And I think in the past perhaps we didn't have that as much, but now there's a real willingness. I mean, Aid and Gareth can comment, but there seems a real willingness to pick things up from other places without having to feel that you've developed them yourself. So,
yeah, no, I would agree with that, Tim, and I think that's one of the things we see within our Northwest GDE network is the ability to just talk quite openly and frankly about what you're developing and how you're transforming care using technology, and actually share that, but also admit as to what didn't go so well as well. So for me, that's a sort of a landmark actually that we're starting to talk in that way.
I don't want to sit here and give you, a third version of the same answer. But your comment on slow followers is an interesting one. When I talk to the organisation that we're working with, I don't actually like to call a fast follower because it implies some kind of dominant, subservient relationship, which it isn't. But when I was talking to them, the director said, well, he said, I've talked to the finance director. He said, we don't want to be any follower of anything, fast follower of anything. And he said, well, you can either be a fast follower or a slow follower. So they decided fast follower is what they wanted to be. And I agree. I think that our networking now is much better than it was, just a few years ago, actually. I said I chair the CIO network, Digital CIO network. Gareth's a member of the CCIO network. And we work very closely together. And there's really good communications between hospitals and other healthcare providers now. We all tend to know a lot more about what we're doing than we did, let's say, 10 years ago.
The question at the front.
When buying a product, or one of these systems, for example, the pathology system, is it preferable that sort of you go back to market and you'd look for something separate that was improved, or is it preferable to work and hope that they sort of iterate with the same product going forward, and you make sort of improvements as you go along, or is it somewhere in between the two, sort of on that scale of just going back to market and buying the next level up from somewhere else, or working with the current people and doing sort of iterative product improvements?
So I'll go on that first. The product doesn't stay the same. I mean, it's a 20-year-old system, but it has been modified many times along the way. Generally, clinical software, you will find a couple of releases a year that keep up with both legislation and requirements of user functionality, things that change. So products change. But what doesn't tend to change is the underlying, platform. If you want, it's a system I could point to that runs on a Unidata database that people have probably not even heard of now. Now, you wouldn't go out and buy that now, but it doesn't mean to say I can't keep developing it incrementally. But the next thing I buy, I will develop incrementally on that platform, if that makes sense.
I suppose the other thing that we're keen to see is some differentiation in terms of things like usability. So as we're encouraging people to think much more about the user interfaces as they do in other environments, then perhaps that'll be the thing that sort of makes people sway and turn, because if we can make it really quick for people and intuitive for people to interact with systems, then there's an efficiency benefit and there's more likely to be quicker uptake. So it may not be the core functionality going forward that makes the difference in that purchasing decision, because a lot of them are very common. It might actually be other features and other things that drive those decisions. So.
That is a good point. I make this point a lot, actually, because people write specifications for software when they go out to the market. It's as if they're specifying software, but they're not at all. They're picking one of maybe 4 systems is what they're doing. They're not specifying anything, except the margins. So the trick is finding the things around the margins that something does well. Because if you go out to buy a hospital patient administration system, you might get a short list of 4, and they will all administer patients. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to work that out. They'll all do the job, and you will be able to go and see a hospital where they're doing the job. So it's the little things around the edges, because you're not actually specifying a system. And I think the terminology sometimes is wrong, actually, but I haven't got any great solution to it.
Thank you. I've got one more. Any more questions from the audience at all for our distinguished panel?
I have a question myself. I've had the honour to talk to all of the fantastic speakers that we've had on our GDE zone over the past couple of days. And when I've been talking to them about their presentations, they've said to me, I've really been looking for a forum where I can meet other GDEs and communicate with them. What are you going to be doing about helping GDEs work with each other so they're not just fighting the same problems blind, that there's better communication between them?
That was one of the ambitions for the Learning Network. So there is an active Learning Network that's had about, I can't remember, it's about 60 events or something like that they've managed. The other thing we've seen is in some of the regions, actually. So Gareth mentioned the Northwest region. There's an active group that meet and discuss sort of the work they're doing. And I think we've seen that sort of in your patch as well, haven't we? So there are things that we are doing, but we recognise we could do more. And part of the plans for the platform that we use for sharing blueprints, for example, is it will be interactive. But what we have to do is manage the demand on the GDE. So one of the things we hope that the blueprints will do will sort of make the visits, the endless sort of visits that people make to the GDEs, high-value visits, rather than asking the same basic questions. So it's a balance between enabling the sharing across the GDEs, enabling access to them, but in a controlled way, and using some of the technology that we're going to use for sharing the blueprints and the program, actually, the trajectories, where people are, all of that sort of stuff. Trying to find the right mix for that. We haven't probably got it right yet, but we'll give it a go.
Okay, thanks. So, one final question from me for our panel. So we've talked about the GDE program and blueprinting and spread and share of ideas. There's obviously a significant amount of investment going into this program. So how, Tim, at program level and aid locally, how are we demonstrating benefits and sort of reflecting upon what the investment and time has delivered for patient care?
So as part of the funding agreements that the GDEs have all signed up to and the fast followers signed up to, there's a statement of plan benefits associated with that, where the trusts say what they believe is going to be delivered, and that's both on safety and quality. It's not all cash, basically. It's about what's the impact on productivity. It's about sort of a much broader set of benefits, because I think, to some extent, digitizing the NHS, that should be a utility. You wouldn't dream of running many industries without the IT to support them, and we're trying to move to that sort of argument, but because we still deal with the Treasury, we still have to do the return on investment as well. So we're actively tracking the benefits that are being delivered as the GDEs move through their programs, but at the same time, we're trying to capture some of the stories, because people engage much more with understanding what's been achieved at a personal level for a patient or for a clinician. So there's the two things that are sort of running side by side, and we're asking the sites to, it always amazes me when I go on a site visit, the number of really good stories that everyone tells you that we sort of haven't necessarily always been aware of. And events like this are great because we can share them, but we think we could do a lot more to capture those soft benefits and communicate them. And again, part of that is through, if you look at the structure of the blueprints on the side, the key thing, you should be able to search the blueprints by the type of benefit that's being delivered. And so if you're looking for things that have improved productivity or improved safety or whatever, you should be able to search through, and it'll categorize the blueprints against the benefits, as well as being able to access them other ways, either by capability or pathway or setting.
Thank you.
So, locally, this is about sustainability of investment. A common question, finance director type question to your CIO might be, when are you going to finish building that electronic medical record aid? You know, the answer is never, actually. So this program roughly doubles our investment. You know, in the last few years, it's pretty flat investment rate. We've invested about £2 million of capital per annum in developing infrastructure, like everything between developing the network and the wireless network, the PCs on the network, and the new software that comes in. And that was not enough. The tech funds came along, and we benefited from those, and we put in electronic prescribing and critical care system and electronic document management. And between that and now the GDE, that represents roughly a doubling of the investment in informatics within our hospital over a 4-year period. Now, coming back to the finance director question, he would expect at the end of that 4 years to dial that back down to £2 million a year. And that is not going to sustain what we have put in by that time. So the really important piece of work that goes on in the interim period, and you can think of it like pump priming the program, if you like, because the benefits piece that has to happen within that 4-year period has to demonstrate to the organisation clearly that at the end of it, it's worth carrying on investing at this rate. That's the challenge, I think.
Agree, absolutely. Okay, well, thank you to our panel. Thank you to the audience. I'll close the session there. I'd just like to say thanks to everybody again who's contributed to these 2 days. It really has been a very productive set of sessions. We'll be running things similarly at similar events, summer school, expo, etc. So look forward to working with you there in future. If you've got any burning desire to contribute to these sessions, then please let the programme team know, and we can schedule in for another time. But thank you, and look forward to seeing you again.
I'd just like to say thank you so much again for taking part in eHealth Week, and your views and your opinions really, really matter, and that's why I'm asking you one last time to contribute to some blueprinting research that's been going on here over the past couple of days. If you haven't entered this survey yet, please make sure you do before you leave. Thank you.